Lila's mornings were usually calm. She liked the quiet, the smell of coffee, and the soft rustle of pages in her small bookstore. That morning, however, felt different. The sky outside was gray, the light soft and a little cold, and for some reason, the usual comfort of routine didn't reach her. She shuffled along the narrow aisles, picking up books that had toppled overnight, brushing dust off their corners. The store smelled of old paper and lavender from the small sachets she kept on the shelves. She was bending down to pick up a copy of Wuthering Heights when she sensed it, a presence behind her. She froze mid-motion, her hand hovering over the book. It was subtle at first, just a faint shift of air, a quiet step closer, but it was enough to make her pulse quicken. Lila? The voice was soft, familiar, almost impossible. She felt the shock in her chest, a jolt that made her straighten abruptly. Her back was still to him, but the warmth in the voice wrapped around her like a memory she didn't know she'd missed. She slowly turned, and there he was. Daniel. Her high school crush, her best friend for years, the one who had disappeared from her life just when she thought she needed him most. He stood there, casual but poised, his presence filling the small room. He looked slightly older, more settled, but his eyes, the way they held hers, were exactly the same. Calm, warm, and loaded with things unsaid. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the morning rain tapping against the large front window filled the silence, blending with the soft rustle of the store. Lila's heart raced. She wasn't sure if it was excitement, surprise, or something deeper she hadn't realized she still carried. I didn't know you were back, she managed finally, her voice quiet but steady. She straightened the book in her hands as if that would hide the tremor in her fingers. Daniel's lips curved into a soft smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes but held a depth of emotion she could feel. I came for something, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the store. But I'm glad I found you instead. Those words hit her harder than she expected. A warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief and anticipation. It had been months, years even, since she had last seen him. Yet here he was, standing in her bookstore, looking at her the way he used to. Like he could see into her, past all the walls she had built. She swallowed, unsure if she wanted to laugh or cry. It's been a long time, she said, more to herself than to him. He nodded, stepping closer, careful not to startle her. Too long, he admitted. I should have stayed in touch, but... He trailed off, the weight of unsaid words hanging in the air. Lila felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to question him, to demand an explanation for his absence. Another part simply wanted to close the distance between them and pretend those lost years didn't exist. She looked down for a moment, fumbling with the edge of her apron, trying to calm the storm inside her. Daniel took a slow step closer. I wasn't sure you'd even want to see me again, he confessed, his voice low. There was no pressure, no insistence, just honesty. Lila met his gaze again. The familiar softness in his eyes brought memories rushing back. Laughter in hallways, long talks under the stars, the way he always seemed to understand her even when no one else did. She realized, almost with a shock, that she had missed him more than she had allowed herself to admit. I didn't expect you, she whispered. It wasn't a complaint. It was a truth she couldn't hide. She felt an unfamiliar tightness in her chest, a flutter that made her heart beat faster. Daniel smiled again, this time letting a hint of relief show. I didn't either, he said. But sometimes life has a way of bringing people back when they need each other most. Her breath caught. It sounded like a line from a book, something she would read and sigh over. Yet here it was, spoken to her, in real life. Her eyes softened, and she realized that despite the months of absence, despite the distance and the silence, the connection they had shared had never really faded. For the first time in a long while, Layla felt the weight on her shoulders lift slightly. She remembered the nights she had spent wishing he would come back, wondering if she had imagined the bond they once had. And now here he was, real, present, standing just a few feet away. Daniel shifted, breaking the silence. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, his tone careful, almost hesitant. It wasn't a question about time. It was a question about whether she was willing to let him in again. Lila nodded, though she didn't speak. She wanted to hear him out, to see where this unexpected meeting might lead. There was an electricity in the air, subtle but undeniable, that made her aware of every heartbeat, every breath. They walked toward the back of the store, past rows of novels and vintage magazines. Every step felt heavy with anticipation, but there was also a strange comfort in the familiarity of his presence. It reminded her of simpler times, when life hadn't been so complicated, when laughter had come easily, and friendship had felt effortless. As they reached the small reading nook, Daniel paused. "I know this might feel sudden," he said, his eyes searching hers, "but I've missed this. Missed us." Lila's heart ached at the words. She could see the sincerity in his gaze, the vulnerability he rarely showed. And in that moment, she realized that her feelings for him hadn't disappeared. They had just been waiting, patient, like seeds buried under snow, waiting for the right season to bloom. She smiled softly, almost shyly. I missed you too," she admitted. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of truth. Daniel's relief was palpable, the tension in his shoulders easing. He reached out, a tentative gesture, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. It was a simple touch, gentle and respectful, yet it sent a thrill through her that she hadn't expected. For a moment, they simply stood there, the world outside the bookstore fading away. The rain continued to fall, painting the windows with streaks of silver, and inside, a quiet warmth began to grow. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected encounter was the start of something new, something they had both been waiting for without realizing it. And then, as if sensing the moment was too fragile to speak further, Daniel took a small step back, giving her space. Yet his eyes never left hers. "I'll stay as long as you want me to," he said softly. "If you let me." Lila's heart leapt. She wanted to reach out, to close the distance, to speak all the words she hadn't dared to say before. But she held herself, savoring the moment, letting the weight of his presence sink in. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope stir inside her, a delicate, thrilling hope that things might be different this time. And so, standing in the quiet bookstore, surrounded by the scent of paper and rain, Lila realized that life had a way of surprising you, of giving second chances when you least expected them, and she was ready to see where this one might lead. The days after Daniel's unexpected return felt surreal to Lila. She found herself waking up with a strange flutter in her chest, anticipating the moments she might see him again. The bookstore, which once felt quiet and ordinary, now carried a sense of possibility. Every creak of the wooden floor, every dust-moted sunbeam seemed more vivid, more alive. Daniel didn't rush or force anything. He moved slowly back into her world, appearing in the mornings, lingering while she arranged shelves or unpacked deliveries. They talked about mundane things at first, weather, new arrivals, town gossip, but there was an undertone to their conversations, a quiet charge in every glance and gesture. Lila felt herself noticing the little things about him again. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the faint scent of cedar in his cologne, the gentle tone of his voice when he asked a question. One rainy afternoon, Lila was crouched on the floor, organizing a pile of vintage magazines she had found in the storage room. She was bent over, absorbed in her task, when she felt him approach. The familiar click of his shoes against the wooden floor made her heart beat faster. "Need some help?" Daniel's voice came from right behind her. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Something in her chest tightened. It wasn't embarrassment. It was anticipation, a sudden awareness of how close he was. I think I've got it," she whispered, trying to sound casual, though her voice trembled slightly. He crouched down beside her, the space between them minimal. Their shoulders brushed, and the simple contact sent a spark of warmth through her body. It was a gentle touch, completely innocent, yet it carried years of unspoken feelings. For a moment, neither spoke, both caught in the quiet intensity of the moment. "I've missed this," Daniel said softly. "Missed being near you." Lila froze. Those words were loaded with a longing she had almost forgotten existed. She straightened slowly, trying to steady her breathing, but she couldn't hide the sudden blush creeping up her cheeks. She wanted to speak, to say something profound, but all that came out was a small, nervous laugh. Daniel mirrored her laughter with a small, soft smile. "It's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to say anything, I just wanted you to know." And in that tiny exchange, everything changed. The familiar comfort of friendship blended seamlessly with something deeper, something they had never acknowledged before. Lila felt a mix of excitement and fear. Excitement because the possibility of reconnecting with Daniel, really reconnecting, was intoxicating. Fear because the intensity of her own feelings, the vulnerability it brought, was almost too much to handle. Days passed, and their interactions grew more effortless. They shared lunches, casual walks down the quiet streets of the town, and moments in the bookstore where words weren't necessary. Lila noticed that Daniel seemed to pay attention to everything about her. The way she tilted her head while reading, the slight pause she took when she thought carefully, the way she laughed softly at small jokes. It made her feel cherished, seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. One evening, they were sitting by the window in the bookstore, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun set. Lila traced the raindrops sliding down the glass, thinking about how life had a strange way of bringing people back when they least expected it. Daniel was beside her, silent, yet his presence was comforting, steady, and unyielding. "You've changed," he said suddenly, his voice low, almost hesitant. Lila glanced at him, unsure what he meant. "Have I?" she asked. You've grown," he said carefully. "But it's not just that. You glow differently now, stronger, wiser, but still the same Lila I knew." Her chest tightened at the words. She had spent years building walls around herself, hiding her vulnerabilities. But hearing him say this made her feel exposed in the safest possible way. She smiled faintly, feeling her heart flutter. "I suppose I've learned a few things," she said softly. Daniel's gaze held hers, and for a moment, neither looked away. There was a tension in the air, electric yet gentle, that made Lila's thoughts scatter. She realized how much she had missed this, the closeness, the subtle intimacy that came from being truly known by someone. Then came a moment that she would never forget. While reaching for a book on a higher shelf, she bent over slightly, unaware of Daniel moving closer behind her. Their eyes met in the mirror of the bookshelf, a flash of recognition, and something unspoken passing between them. Daniel's hand hovered near hers for a brief second, just above her shoulder, a gesture so careful it barely counted as touch. But it made Lila's heart pound wildly. "I've wanted to tell you something for a long time," he said quietly, voice almost drowned out by the soft hum of the bookstore. Her breath caught. She turned slightly, meeting his eyes fully now, the intensity of the moment pressing down on her chest. "What is it?" she whispered, unsure if she wanted to hear the answer, yet desperate for it. Daniel's hand brushed gently against hers, a fleeting touch that sent shivers down her spine. I've never stopped thinking about you," he admitted. "Even when I left, even when I thought I had to be away. You were always here." He placed a hand lightly on the small of her back, close enough to make her feel the warmth of him, yet careful enough to respect the space between them. Lila's eyes brimmed with emotion. She had rehearsed a million scenarios in her mind for this moment, yet nothing compared to the reality of hearing him say the words she had silently hoped for all these years. She felt tears threaten to spill but blinked them away, not ready to break the fragile perfection of the moment. I thought I was over it," she whispered. "Thought I was fine without knowing where you were, what you were doing. But I wasn't. I missed you too. More than I realized." Daniel's smile was soft, tender, and filled with relief. He leaned slightly closer, their foreheads almost touching. "Then maybe we can start again," he murmured. The simplicity of his words, the promise in his tone made Lila's heart leap. She wanted to believe it, wanted to hold on to the feeling that had suddenly returned with such force. In the quiet bookstore, surrounded by the scent of paper and rain, time seemed to slow. All that mattered was this moment, this undeniable connection that had withstood distance, absence, and silence. For the first time in years, Lila allowed herself to hope, not for a fleeting crush, not for a casual friendship, but for something real, lasting, and beautiful. She realized that sometimes life gave second chances, and perhaps this was hers. And just as the sky outside turned to dusky purple, Daniel's hand lingered near hers, a gentle anchor in the storm of emotions. Lila knew without doubt that everything was about to change. Not with grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but with quiet, steady presence, and the recognition that two hearts, long apart, could find their way back to each other. The days after their quiet confession in the bookstore felt surreal for Lila. Every time she saw Daniel, the world seemed sharper, brighter, and yet delicate, as if it could shatter with a single wrong move. They spent hours together, often lost in conversation or comfortable silence. The town, once ordinary, now felt full of possibility. Every street corner, every cafe, even the small park bench felt like a stage for their renewed connection. Lila noticed herself watching him more closely. The way he smiled at strangers, the slight tilt of his head when he was thinking, the warmth in his voice when he spoke about things he loved. Each small detail seemed to etch itself into her memory. She realized she had always missed him, more than she had ever admitted. And now that he was back, it was impossible to hide. One evening, they found themselves walking through the quiet streets after a sudden rain shower. The air smelled of wet asphalt and blooming flowers, fresh and clean. Daniel slipped his hand into hers, almost unconsciously, and Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest. The touch was gentle, steady, and grounding. It was a silent declaration, a reassurance that he was still there, still present, and still caring. They walked without speaking for a while, each step echoing softly in the empty streets. Then Daniel stopped and turned to her, his expression serious. "Lila, there's something I need to tell you," he said, voice low. She looked at him, heart suddenly racing. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that made her stomach twist. "What is it?" she asked softly, bracing herself for whatever was coming. Daniel took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around hers just slightly. "When I left all those years ago, I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to handle what I felt for you. I thought distance would help, but it didn't. I was scared, and I didn't want to lose you by making a mistake." Lila felt her chest ache. The explanation she had waited for, the reason behind his sudden absence, was finally there. She could feel the honesty in his words, the raw emotion he rarely showed. I waited for you," she whispered, "even when I didn't know I was waiting, even when I tried to move on. Part of me hoped you'd come back." Daniel's eyes softened, glistening in the dim streetlights. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a simple gesture that made her heart skip. "I'm here now," he said, voice trembling slightly. "And I'm not going anywhere. I promise." The sincerity in his words, the weight behind them, made something inside Lila break open. Years of longing, heartbreak, and unspoken feelings rushed to the surface. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let the moment be ruined by tears. Instead, she let herself feel the warmth of his presence, the comfort in his closeness, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. As they continued walking, their hands intertwined, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, childhood memories, favorite books, and small adventures they had shared. Yet beneath every word there was a tension, a gentle pull that neither could ignore. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something deeper, more profound. A quiet longing that had grown stronger with time. Back at the bookstore, they settled into the small reading nook, the soft glow of the lamps casting a warm light over the room. Lila watched Daniel as he traced the spine of a book absent-mindedly. She felt a pang of affection, a yearning that made her chest tighten. She wanted to reach out, to close the distance, to tell him everything she had felt all these years, but fear held her back. What if he changed his mind? What if the years apart had changed him too much? Daniel seemed to sense her hesitation. He shifted closer, his shoulder brushing hers lightly. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "Just being here, like this, it's enough for me." Her heart leapt. The simplicity of his words, the quiet assurance in his tone, made her feel safe, seen, and cherished. She realized that love didn't always need grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it was in the quiet moments, the small touches, the shared silences that spoke louder than any words could. Days turned into nights, and their connection deepened. They shared laughter over spilled coffee, quiet moments of reflection, and the kind of conversations that lasted until the store closed. Lila felt herself letting go of old fears, old doubts, and embracing the possibility of happiness. She noticed how easily Daniel made her smile, how his presence soothed her anxieties, and how natural it felt to be near him again. One afternoon, while Lila was reaching for a book on a high shelf, she bent over, unaware that Daniel had moved closer. His presence was behind her, and she felt it before she saw him. An awareness, a gentle warmth, a protective energy that made her heart race. Daniel's voice was low and careful. "Are you okay?" he asked, standing right behind her. She turned slightly, meeting his gaze in the reflection of the glass-covered books. There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability, a longing, a silent question that made her chest tighten. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice betrayed the rapid beat of her heart. For a moment, they simply stood there, the world around them fading. The quiet bookstore, the faint hum of the rain outside, even the scent of old paper seemed distant. All that mattered was the space between them, charged with anticipation and emotion. Daniel's hand hovered near hers, a tentative gesture, almost shy in its intimacy. "I've waited for this," he said softly, "for us to be here, like this." Lila felt tears threaten to spill, but she blinked them away, overwhelmed by the depth of the moment. She realized that this connection, this closeness, was worth every lost year, every moment of longing. It wasn't just about rekindling a friendship or revisiting a past crush. It was about recognizing a bond that had survived time, distance, and silence. She reached out slowly, brushing her fingers against his. The contact was light, almost hesitant, yet it spoke volumes. Daniel's hand found hers, holding it gently but firmly, a promise without words. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing in the quiet, letting the intensity of their emotion settle around them. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lose you again." Lila felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief, joy, and longing. She smiled softly, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. "You won't," she whispered. "I won't let you go." And in that small, quiet bookstore, amidst the scent of paper and rain, two hearts that had been apart for too long finally found their rhythm again. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic confessions, just the quiet, steady assurance that they were together now, fully present, and ready to face whatever came next. As the evening light faded into night, Lila realized that love wasn't always about timing or perfection. Sometimes it was about resilience, patience, and the courage to leave your heart open, even after it had been broken. And she knew, without a doubt, that she had left her heart open for Daniel, and that he had done the same. The bookstore was quiet that evening, bathed in the warm glow of the lamps. Outside, rain fell softly, tapping against the windows like a gentle rhythm. Lila was straightening the shelves, arranging books that had been returned, her mind elsewhere, lost in the quiet comfort of routine. The rain made the store feel cocooned, intimate, as if the world outside had disappeared. She bent over to reach for a rare edition on the bottom shelf, unaware that Daniel had entered quietly behind her. He watched her for a moment, the familiar sight of her, focused, graceful, and entirely unaware of him, filling him with a warmth he hadn't expected. He moved closer, careful not to startle her, but the tension in the air was undeniable. "I've been thinking," he said softly, standing right behind her. Lila turned slightly, startled, but not scared. She met his eyes in the reflection of the glass-fronted bookshelf, and the world seemed to pause. There was something in his gaze, a depth of emotion that made her breath catch. Daniel took a careful step closer, his presence solid and reassuring. "All these years," he continued, "I've wondered if we'd ever get another chance. And now, here we are." Lila's chest tightened. Her heart was racing, and yet she felt calm in a way she hadn't in years. She realized that the moments they had shared recently, long walks, quiet conversations, laughter over coffee, had built something unshakable. Something real. He reached out, a tentative hand hovering near hers. She didn't pull back. Instead, she let their fingers brush, a simple gesture that carried everything. Words couldn't. "I never stopped caring," Daniel whispered. "Even when I was away, even when I thought I had to stay gone, I carried you with me." The honesty in his voice, the sincerity in his expression, made something inside Lila melt. She had carried him too, every day, quietly, like a secret flame she had been afraid to acknowledge. Now, it was out in the open, unspoken yet undeniable. Daniel's hand moved to rest lightly on her back, close enough to offer warmth, close enough to make her feel his steady heartbeat. "I don't want to let you go," he said, almost in a whisper, but the weight of the words made her heart leap. Lila tilted her head slightly, feeling the quiet power of the moment. She wanted to speak, to say something profound, but no words could match the intensity of the connection they shared. Instead, she leaned slightly into him, allowing herself to be near, letting the comfort of his presence wash over her. For a long moment, they simply stood there, wrapped in the quiet intimacy of the bookstore. The rain continued to fall, each drop a gentle rhythm that matched the pulse of her heart. Time seemed to stretch, and in that stretch, all the lost years, all the distance, all the uncertainty, they faded away. "I've imagined this moment for so long," Daniel said finally, his voice low and steady. "Not like in a story or a movie, but like this. Real, simple, just us." Lila smiled softly, feeling tears threaten to spill, but she blinked them back. She didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. This quiet, steady, gentle presence was everything she had hoped for, everything she had longed for without realizing it. They moved together naturally, shoulders brushing, hands finding each other with ease. The past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was now, this fragile yet powerful connection, and the mutual understanding that they had both waited for the right moment. Daniel's hand lingered on hers, a gentle anchor. "I don't want to lose you again," he repeated, but this time with certainty, as if saying it aloud made it real. "You won't," Lila whispered, feeling the truth in her own words. "I won't let you go." He smiled, a slow, relieved smile that reached his eyes, softening his entire expression. And in that smile, she saw everything she had been waiting for: reassurance, love, and the promise of something lasting. The evening stretched on, and they moved through the bookstore together, arranging shelves, sharing laughter over small mishaps, and talking in quiet tones about everything and nothing. There was a lightness now, a sense of ease that had been missing for years. The connection between them was no longer tentative. It was steady, resilient, and real. As night fell, they found themselves by the window again, watching the rain streak across the glass. Daniel wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders, and she leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body and the calm rhythm of his breathing. "You make everything better," he said softly, resting his forehead against hers. "Even a rainy night like this feels perfect with you." Lila felt her heart swell. She realized that love wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet and patient, built slowly over time, and felt strongest in the small shared moments. "I think I've been waiting for this my whole life," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion but filled with certainty. "Not just for you to come back, but for us to be together, like this." Daniel kissed her forehead gently, a tender gesture full of meaning. "I promise you," he said softly, "we'll make the most of every moment from now on." The rain outside slowed, and the store felt warmer, as if it too recognized the turning point. The books, the shelves, the faint smell of paper and rain, it all became part of the memory of this night. The night they allowed themselves to finally be honest with their hearts. They sat together in the reading nook, sharing quiet conversation and laughter, the comfort of each other's presence filling every space. Lila realized that she had never felt more at home, more understood, or more loved. The years of longing, the heartbreak of absence, and the uncertainty of the past had all led to this moment, a moment that was theirs, and theirs alone. Daniel's hand found hers again, fingers intertwining, and she rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes for a brief moment, savoring the peace she had longed for. This was more than a reunion. It was a new beginning. They had both grown, both waited, and now, together, they could move forward. As the night deepened and the rain ceased, Lila felt a sense of clarity and joy she hadn't experienced in years. Love, she realized, wasn't about perfect timing or flawless circumstances. It was about resilience, patience, and the courage to leave your heart open. Even after years of waiting, Daniel whispered again, a quiet affirmation that made her heart soar. You're mine now, and I'm yours, forever. Lila smiled against his chest, feeling a warmth that spread through every part of her. Forever, she echoed. And in the cozy, rain-scented bookstore, surrounded by the stories of countless other hearts, their story found its own perfect beginning. It was a love born of patience, rekindled through understanding, and destined to last. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just two hearts finally in sync, finally home. And with that, Lila knew that life had given her exactly what she had been waiting for, in the form of the one person who had always been meant to be by her side. The night was quiet, the world outside calm, and inside, a love that had been tested by time had finally found its place, steady, strong, and unshakable.